Samson's main policy, he was a judge, right? Important judge in the Hebrew Bible. Samson's main policy is fuck those Philistines, or those Philistines, whoever they were, fuck them Philistine bastards, right? The Philistines were the bad guys. He killed 30 innocent people in Ashkelon. He killed a whole bunch of Philistines because his father-in-law wouldn't let him remarry or take his wife back home. So he actually burns their crops because of the father of Samson's wife, wanted to protect her. And he actually gave her to the best man, but Samson is going to burn the crops and kill all those 300 foxes and then kill 30 people, 30 innocent men in Ashkelon to make good on that bet. Ashkelon, that's 13 miles north of Gaza. What the hell does any of this have to do with the Philistines? He had to make a bet, so he killed that was innocent people. He burns the cross because of the father of Samson. Why did he do that? He's taking it out on the people of Philistine, but not of the individuals that's fucking him over. If he was mad at the father of his wife, the father-in-law, he should have took it up with him. So this is thrice, he's going to punish blameless, innocent people. Samson is just going around killing, there was 4 major sessions. He killed the 30 people in Ashkelon, killed a whole bunch of people in revenge for something, and then killed 1,000 with a donkey jawbone, then killed 3,000 at his final act of life, right, his final act of defiance. He was a suicide bomber, killed 3,000 people, just like 9/11. So that's, okay, he's got a he's terrorist in Ashkelon, terrorist against the Philistines. It's kind of hard to tell were the Philistines the bad guys or the good guys. We're supposed to believe if the Philistines were just, evil Nazi pieces of shit, then Samson's fascism, murderous, could be somewhat, but we don't know that for sure. Now, the Philistines did some fucked up shit. They gouged out Samson's eyes. They threatened his first wife with burning the house down. So in her defense, right, they threatened to kill her and her father. So you could say that the Philistines had started it because they had threatened to kill, right, his wife and his father, but the wife went ahead and took the side of the friends and then fucked Samson over. The wife could have redeemed herself by just telling Samson straight up what they were trying to get, they wanted the answer to the riddle or whatever, a stupid-ass riddle. And her father gives it to the best man. It's not really a friend at all. You're not the best friend. You're not even a friend at all if you're going to steal the wife. What the fuck? So, yeah, ultimately, to me, Samson is a Gilgamesh figure. He's no Reeeves. Reeeves, if you're going to look at a historical figure of whom to emulate, look at to Reeeves. Do not try to emulate Samson whatsoever. He might have been an actual guy back there, but you can't. He's shrouded in mythology, so it's hard to tell what he was and what he wasn't. But taking 300 foxes and tying them together and setting them on fire, killing 30 innocent people in Ashkelon because of a stupid bet. There's just a lot of things. Ripping up a line, you come across the line, do not try to rip that thing in half. You will lose. So Gilgamesh was like 5,000 years ago. He's shrouded in a bunch of bullshit mythology too, so you don't really know. Gilgamesh built the wall of Uruk, but what is Samson's wall? What was his actual... when I think of him being a judge of Israel, that's bullshit. He just hated the damn Philistines. He wasn't like an actual administrative government, like a judge. Did he build a wall? Did he build a hospital? Any roads? Any schools? Did he do anything for the people of Israel? They added that sentence just like they added, then he killed 1,000 people with the jawbone. Then he killed 3,000. And then he ruled over Israel for 20 years. Just the last sentence, an aside. They just say as an aside that, so just what, to fit him as a judge? Oh, the Bible says he's a judge. Ultimately, like I said, in your darkest moments, he's not a good hero. Samson is not a good person. I guess he maintained his kingdom, and Israel is, alive today. And so you could say in the long run. But Samson is just tribalistic. He's beastly, During tough times, a criminal piece of shit can give the hopeless and the desperate a smidgen of hope, but only in the darkest of times. He didn't do anything, for the people, nothing for Israel. He didn't talk about establishing a bank or currency or anything. Democracy. So really the only thing that happened was just all this crazy shit. Right? Nothing in Judges 13 to 16 talks about Samson being a judge for 20 years, except for the final, sentence. So really, Samson, you just had 7 crazy-ass episodes, right? Marries this woman, she's a Philistine, tricks him, kills 30 innocent people, takes 300 foxes, lights them on fire, kills 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone, he's hiding in a rock. Then the Hebrews give him up, they give him to the Philistine, and then his final act of he kills all of them with collapsing the temple. He picks up that big-ass door, carries it 20 miles uphill, all 4 ways. So you just have these 7 crazy-ass episodes. He was a Hebrew. He was a strong man. He was able to, scare them, and then they wanted to humiliate him. They gouged out his eyes, and that's not cool, right? They tortured him and all that shit. So I could see the Philistines being the bad guys, but I could see them, Samson is just so serial killing, mass murdering that, it's easy for me to see that Samson's the bad guy. Are you killing? You just keep, are you kidding? He just keeps killing people. Over and over again. Now the reason why I'll concede a little bit, I do believe he's a Gilgamesh figure, because was there a Samson? Yeah. He was, went to Gaza to be with a prostitute. Why would you, if you're trying to make up a mythology for your god, hey, Zeus, I'm going to make up Zeus. Well, what are you going? Well, he's going to go to Gaza, and he's going to go be with a prostitute, and the Philistinians, about get him, but he picks up this door. So what I could see is that there's a smidgen of truth to any one of these stories. He picked up a door, maybe he, kicked the door down or picked it up and threw it off to the side. It wasn't as big as a door, and he didn't carry it up all them hills or whatever. He just picked it up and scared him, and then, got on a horse and then took off. He was with a prostitute in Gaza. Why would you, add that to Zeus? Let's see, what are we going to make Zeus do? He's going to be with a prostitute in Gaza. He's going to take 300 foxes, he's going to tie their tails together. Maybe he did 2 foxes and, set the crops on fire that way. And I guess making it 300 foxes, I don't know. So I guess it's just, why did you, if he is just completely fictional, why would you add that crazy, unique, specific shit? A donkey jawbone, 300 foxes, he went to see a prostitute in Gaza. You want him to be the hero of the story, so they're just saying, I guess, too many bad things about Samson for... Is there any saving grace? Is there any saving... He's no Bass Reeves. I listed a whole bunch of people that's way better to admire than Samson. Abraham Lincoln, Jack Johnson, Muhammad Ali, Willis Russell, Stephen G. Burbridge. These are great historical heroes who came from nothing and macheted through the jungle, got through the bullshit. So if you're going to be making up a Zeus, why would you make up, I don't know, it just doesn't. So that's why I feel like there's a smidgen of truth to some of these stories. Maybe his suicide act was, didn't kill 3,000 Palestinians, but killed a dozen, just kind of pushed them all off the edge of something. They never heard about what actually happened, and so they was like, well, shit, we gotta make it up. How did he went out like that? He went out with a bang like that? Damn. But they didn't know the specific details, so okay, well, how do you think it happened? He existed 1200 BC, 200 years before King David. They just got out of Egypt. The Jews are now living in Canaan, being oppressed by the Philistines. So, what's the saving grace? Is there any saving grace to any of this? He is a wild, untamed, savage beast, and frankly, that's terrible, that's awful. He's a wild, untamed, savage beast, and his final principle was not cutting his hair, and then he cut his hair, so in a way I could kind of see, he just turned away from God, right? He just turned away. He was just a wild, untamed, savage beast doing a bunch of wild, untamed, savage, beastly shit. And in dark times, maybe a wild, untamed, savage beast, like they say he's like Hercules or like Enkidu. And in some respects, yeah, but he's not a judge. He's not a king. He's not leading Israel to anything. If anything, he almost led Israel to, death and destruction, because he went around killing all them Philistinians, and then they came after him. So they almost, wiped out all of Israel because of Samson's crazy-ass behavior. So he's no hero. He's no hero of mine. And there's a million other way better, heroes. If you're in dark times, I'm not going to look to Samson and be like, you know what? What would Samson do? You should ask, what would Jesus do? What would Che Guevara do? What would Martin Luther King do? So, anything else? Let's see. Reeeves. We'll just go right here. There were 4 pieces left, 2 greens, a red, and an orange. He took one of the greens and held it up to his eye and looked at the rising sun through the candy. Once he had done the same thing with a green bottle, but this green was much more intense, almost alive, and he smiled at how pretty it was. Then he popped the green piece in his mouth, since he had 2 of them, and looked through the red and tried to look through the red and the orange, holding one against the other. He was turned backwards in the seat because the sun was coming up in the east. He was heading west when he heard a sound in the front. He wheeled around and his heart froze. Off to the side, a small band of mounted Indians was coming out of a gully. In the first instant, the old fear came back, but he saw that something was different about these people. They were not all mounted. There were 5 or 6 men on horses, and walking in back of them were women and children, a dozen or so. None of them were painted, and they had no visible lances or bows. The horses weren't painted. Each horse was dragging a pair of skid poles with cross pieces of willow tied in back and bundles wrapped in hide tied on top of the skids. The horses looked poorly, as did the people. The children especially were very thin, except that their bellies bulged from hunger. Many of them, as well as the women, had open sores on their faces and arms. Some held out their hands, begging, and Bass thought briefly of taking some flour and giving it to them, but if the mister awakened while he was doing it, he'd be in trouble. So he looked away. He hadn't seen them on the road because they had camped in the gully. Now he could see smoke from fires they'd put out. After he'd passed, they pulled onto the road, going in the same general direction. The mules were slow, so that the small band almost kept up with him. Another 2 hours, they were still only a quarter mile in back of the wagon, and Bass had stopped watching them. They made him sad. He was looking ahead, thinking of those Indians. If those Indians could be hidden in the gully, then other Indians could be hidden. When he heard the mister wake up, "Damn rot gut whiskey," the mister said, still slightly drunk, although sober and fast, had everything in it, plus rattlesnake heads. "Who are they?" He had seen the band of Indians back of the wagon. "I don't know. They came out of a ditch. They're starving, hungry, and held their hands out for food." "Creeks," the mister said, "are Cherokee Indians from down south, are moving to the territory. They might have come all the way from Florida. It's no wonder they're starving. I don't know how they got this far." He fell back against the flour barrel and was soon snoring again. None of it made much sense to Bass Reeves. He didn't know what Florida was or a territory, but he knew better than to start asking questions when the mister was coming off a bad drunk. And any drunk where he had talking about rattlesnake heads, and the whiskey was definitely a bad one. Besides, the mules, since that they were getting closer to home, the wagon pulled away from the Indians, and it was a beautiful morning. The green candy still tasted sweet, and Bass Reeves had saved a red and orange and green to show Mammy. When he got home, he had stories on top of stories to tell of amazing things he had seen in Paris. He slapped the reins. "Come on, mules, pick it up. We want to get in before dark." The mules pretended to speed up, but then settled back into their normal rhythm. hooves clopping in the dust in Bass Reeves' side. They would get there when they got there. Chapter 5, page 51, fall 1840. Running. Some things had changed. Bass Reeves was 16 now, pushing 17. He was as big as he would be when he became a full-grown man, except that his neck and shoulders had not quite filled. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighed 180 pounds. He could lift more than his weight and third in the wagon, and once when a mule had acted up, Bass Reeves grabbed it by the halter, twisted its head, and thrown it on the ground. If he wasn't quite a man, yet embodying mind and knowledge, he had a man's duties. The mister had battled the jug for 3 years and had finally surrendered. He would awaken and have coffee with a little whiskey and walk down and look at the corrals, the corrals without speaking, then go back into his house and drink the day away. Now and then a trip to town for whiskey and supplies. Bass Reeves ran the ranch. Bass Reeves gathered cattle, took care of the stock, shoed horses, doctored sick animals. Mammy cooked and took care of the mister and guided Bass Reeves when he needed guidance. If the mister had been sober, he wouldn't have allowed these things. But as he let go, Bass Reeves moved in and began, like tending the horses' hooves. They started getting too long and cracked and poorly shaped, so Bass Reeves took the hoof rasp, fixed them up, even the bottoms, cleaned the frogs with a hoof pick. Soon the mister left those jobs to Bass Reeves entirely. Riding after cattle, one day Bass Reeves was rummaging around in a junk pile in the back of the granary, and he found an old Mexican vaquero saddle with cracked leather and an open seat. He took the saddle to the quarters and started to repair it. He was surprised when shade covered him, and he looked up to see Flowers staring down at him. What Bass Reeves said, as usual, Flowers didn't speak, but he took the saddle and walked back to where he sat to work. So yeah, Bass Reeves. Samson ain't no Bass Reeves. Shit. Samson. Like he's